Hey guys, how are you feeling today? This is my second training on Facebook, and I actually just recorded this. Actually, I did this seminar live with a whole bunch of people, but then I realized that I forgot to push the recording button. So I'm going to do it once again as a training, a presentation that I will actually upload on my website and on Facebook in my Facebook group so that you can all watch it once again. I hope that all of these little issues are not going to bother you. But yeah, so let's go straight into it. So today we're talking about conflict resolution. We're talking about how can we stay in touch with ourselves, how can we stay um, nicely balanced emotionally, because in this time of trouble we are going through so many difficult situations. This whole working from home, this whole pandemic has been causing us all a lot of disruption in our life. So many of our habits, so many of our regular routines have been completely um, destroyed, I would say, in the last few months, and everybody's feeling very anxious and very angry with many things. We feel a lot more worry and annoyance in the air, and I think that's where we're all struggling to stay nice with each other. So I've had really good feedback from the participants in the live webinar that just happened. I'm just going to go straight into sharing with you what I shared with them, and hopefully, if you have any questions, you can also ask me on the Facebook group. So today's talk, I'm going to share my screen now so that you can see all the beautiful things that I've prepared for you, is all about how we really want to communicate with each other better. So I'm going to just put this on slideshow so that all of you can see it. And, the idea of sharing with you how to resolve conflicts and to create a deeper connection with your partner obviously came to me because in the last few weeks, I've had a whole bunch of clients who I've seen, I've been seeing for a while, and maybe they stopped seeing me because things were going better, who have called me for emergency sessions, basically to help them vent or to help resolve specific conflicts that were coming up, because suddenly they were spending so much more time with their significant other. And I thought, well, actually, this could really help so many people out there. So I'm making this available to every one of you who wants to have a deeper connection. I feel that, this whole situation, yes, it's difficult. Lots of people are going through a really hard time. But, when did you ever imagine that you're going to beg to be let to go back to work? It seems that, our psychology is so weird. When we're now asked to stay home to literally save the planet, the one thing that we really desperately want to do is to go outside and to go to work. So I thought maybe for today, I'd like to ban a few things so that psychologically we start doing them a lot more. And the one thing that I would like to ban is listening. So hopefully you will be more open to listen to your partner after this whole presentation that I'm going to give you today. So let's start with how different people respond to conflict. What does it mean that we respond differently to conflict? Well, depending on our upbringing, depending on our experience, depending on how we've seen people fight before, we respond to conflict in 5 different ways. And these 5 ways are simply, one of them is we become very accommodating, or the opposite of that is avoiding the conflict. So when we're accommodating in a conflict, it means that we're always agreeing straight away to what the other side has to say. We don't really have any counter arguments. We don't have the courage to express our point of view. And we simply never have our needs met in an argument. When there's something happening, but our partner is much stronger, we tend to be, allowing them to take us wherever they want to go. Other people may be avoiding, which means that The conflicts are there. The partner may be trying to resolve something, but it's this kind of stuff where like, no, 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 I'm not listening. There's nothing happening. Everything is great. We don't have a communication problem. We don't have any problem. We just need to, just move on, put it all under the carpet. Obviously, we all know how that feels when your partner doesn't want to resolve something, whether it is your boss, whether it is a work colleague or your life partner. Avoiding conflict is a very natural way of dealing with it sometimes, but is never very productive. The next way is when you're being very competitive in a conflict. Some people love the idea of conflict. Some people jump into it because they love to be proved right, or they love to think that they're right and they're going to win that argument, and they're going to just push for that solution as much as they can. If you are the competitive fighter, so to speak, it can actually be very difficult for you to have any balanced relationship in your life, because you're causing arguments as much as you are responding to other people communicating their issues with you. Other people tend to be very compromising, which is quite similar to accommodating. But accommodating is basically allowing the other person to make the decision, so completely going with the flow. Compromising is people who are really trying to have some of their needs met, and they sometimes say, well, but I would like it to be that way. But I will talk a lot about this a little bit later. Compromising for me is a lose-lose solution. A lot of people think that to be successful in a relationship, you need to compromise, but I prefer to have a negotiation, which is a win-win. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more towards the end of this presentation, of this training. The final response is to be collaborating. And this is kind of what I'm aiming at with this presentation, to get more people to respond to conflict in a collaborative way. That means that we are, both parties on the argument are looking for suitable solutions, for mutually acceptable solutions. So the win-win negotiation that I mentioned early on. Now, let's look at why do we respond so uncharacteristically sometimes in a conflict. So depending on whichever one of the 5 types of responses that I've mentioned earlier, all of our responses to conflict are actually triggered by a little part of our brain called the amygdala. The amygdala is this little almond-shaped part of the brain, I would say, that is one of the most fundamental things we are born with. So it is the part of the brain that is responsible for our survival. So it is the part that is literally like a fire system, like a fire alarm that is constantly on and on and on, looking around, scanning for danger to make sure that there's nothing that is attacking us or something that is likely to kill us, something is hiding in the bushes. So it is essentially always on, regardless of whether we're asleep or awake. And it triggers an immediate physical reaction in the body. And it is a very beautiful, it's a really, really important part of our bodies, because it keeps us alive. Its job is essentially to keep us alive. The moment the amygdala is triggered and responds with this fight or flight, it pushes a huge amount of adrenaline into our body, and it gives us this superpower, which makes us able to run at inhuman speed to escape the lion, or to actually find the energy to fight maybe a much bigger adversary. The problem with the amygdala is that in general, it is an instinctive response of our body. We are not able to control it consciously. We cannot say, okay, now I'm triggering my fight or flight. If you've thought about it, it's actually because there is a different part of our brain that has been engaged, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But essentially, the job of the amygdala is to respond to triggers. So like I said, it's a bit like a fire alarm system that keeps scanning the environment. Now, because we don't live in the plains of Africa anymore, and our survival is not threatened by tigers in mountains and elephants on a rampage, the things that we believe are going to kill us are if a boss sends us an email where we interpret some sort of threatening tone, or we see that our significant other is not looking very happy with us, or they're huffing and puffing, and we're immediately thinking that it's gonna be some sort of response that I'm gonna have to fight with. So in order to stop the damaging effects of reacting instinctively in a fight, we need to engage a part of our brain that is called prefrontal cortex. You can see where it is here on the picture. The prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain that basically analyzes our environment. It starts looking at whatever was the perceived threat that got the amygdala triggered, and decides whether our social skills are necessary to be used in this situation so that we have a better experience of life. Because the prefrontal cortex is the bit that says, actually, you know what, you are not being attacked by a tiger, so you can chill. The only problem with this is because it needs a few seconds or a few fractions of a second to do this analysis, to really make a decision whether running or fighting is really, really necessary, or we can respond with more civility to that particular threat. It takes a little while for this part of our brain to come online. And this is something that gives us conscious control. So when this part of our brain is engaged, we are able to change the way we respond to a stimulus, which means that we have already made a decision that this is not a life or death situation, and we can choose our response, which means we are not reactive. We are not instinctively punching before we have a chance to think, hang on a minute, is my partner really trying to kill me here? So let's start talking about the solution. What am I offering you today? What am I bringing to the table? Well, I would like to introduce a tool that I have been using for the past 6 years in my relationship coaching practice that has helped many, many couples resolve ongoing conflicts that have been, part of their everyday life for years. And this tool is simply called the communication map, and it's literally a map. It's a step-by-step process that is all captured in one page, which I can send to you if you're interested in using this in your own life, that allows you to communicate better with your partner, to create deeper intimacy, to understand each other better, and to resolve whatever ongoing conflict you have. And in this training, I'm going to give you the step-by-step process by which you can resolve every single conflict in your life, because it's a structure, and our brain understands structure. It gives you an easy to follow path, so that you get from whatever angry and frustrated and reactive place that you're in right now because of all this anxiety and worry and pressure and feeling overwhelmed, to finding new solutions, new ways of dealing with this stuff, and not to be so responding from the animal side, the primitive side, but to engage this more social aspect of your personality. So let's see, who is this helpful for? Well, wherever you are in your life, you will have a whole bunch of different people that you might end up having an argument with. They could be your neighbors, they could be people in the street, they could be your boss, they could be people in your team, or a partner, your children, your parents, or your friends. With all these people, anytime you are experiencing an issue, there will be a problem of communication, you can use this step-by-step process and resolve that conflict in a way that is positive and different. And you no longer need to say, oh, but we tried everything and it didn't work, because I know that's what everybody says when they come to me. So let's start. But before we start, actually, I would like to explain a few things that I found to be really, really important when I discuss this with my clients. So the first things are, there 9 rules of the road, as I call them. They're really things that we need to understand about conflicts. And the first thing that you really may not be aware of is that when you're experiencing an issue that is causing arguments, that is causing conflicts, it's because there is a need that you have that is not being met in your relationship. It may be a need for more attention. It may be a need for affection, for physical connection, for intimacy. It can be simply a need for cleanliness around you. Obviously germs are a big deal right now. All of these things are legitimate, and this moves us to the next issue, the next rule of the road, which is to actually say that no matter what you think, if your partner is experiencing an issue, It is completely valid that they have that issue. It's not up to you to decide if they have it or not, because you may not be aware they have this need. It could be an emotional need for attention, for affection, for acceptance, or it could be a functional need for order and cleanliness, and I don't know, to have a nice smelling partner in their bed. So just remember, in any argument, whatever the partner is experiencing, it is valid that they have that issue. So you can't really dismiss it and say, oh, that can't be true. I never do that. Well, you may not, but they will interpret it that way. The other thing that you need to remember is that whoever has the unmet need, they own that issue. So try not to turn it around to say, oh, but I have the same problem and you're not responding to it in a different way, because what you might think is the same unmet need, or what looks like the same issue on the outside or on the surface, it may come from a completely different need. So it's good to be mindful that our perspective completely shifts in different situations. So listen to what the partner has to say. What does it really mean for them? Also, that in order to resolve an issue, you really need to take it one step at a time, which means that often what happens in couples arguments is something that my relationship expert guru Esther Perel calls kitchen sinking. Kitchen sinking is when in the course of an argument you bring up everything, all the issues that you're having. Well, and you make me unhappy, and we haven't had sex in ages, and you didn't do this last time, and last summer when we were on holiday you treated me like a jerk, whatever. So you're bringing everything up at the same time. Well, that's obviously not helping to resolve the conflict, because you can't solve all your issues at the same time. You really need to go one by one, even if that might mean you have to have several of these conversations. It's worth doing, but do it one by one. It is also important that in an argument, in the course of creating a new path for yourselves in resolving that conflict, it's important that you listen to each other. If we speak over our partner, well, obviously we're not listening at that time, because our brain can't process listening and talking at the same time. It's just pretty impossible for us to handle that much information. So it's really important that you take turns, that you respect your partner, and take your time listening to them, and then make it clear to them that it's your turn to speak. We also need to be mindful that only 7% of what we say is actually the words that we use, that so much more is to be seen and heard and noticed in the way, in the intonation, in the tone of voice, in how loud we speak or how softly we speak, in the way our body looks. If I'm like this, even if I say I love you, that particular body language might still be interpreted as very threatening and therefore not productive. You also need to listen with curiosity. One of the most important things in communication is to actually use our ears twice as much as we use our mouth, which means that we need to listen so carefully to what our partner has to say, because what happens most of the time, we already assume we know what they're going to say, and this is why we never find a new solution, because we don't truly listen to them with curiosity to really understand what is that they're experiencing. Number 8 is to maybe shift from believing that every argument is a war to a situation in which you assume a win-win is possible. So often when we fight, we want to be proved right. We want to demonstrate to our partner that our interpretation of reality, our ideas, our opinions are the truth. There isn't such a thing as the truth. There is such a thing as our truth, how I feel, how I see, how you feel, how you see, but there isn't, a need to see a conversation as the need to fight. A win-win solution is a solution in which both parties are happy with the outcome. So taking your time to find that solution is totally worth it, because it means you're not going to be going round in circle having the same battle over and over again. And then the last, but really one of the most important aspects of trying to work towards a positive resolution to a conflict, is to know that our relationships are created through the energy that we put in it together. So whatever I put into the story and you put into the story, it creates a space. It's a relationship is a separate entity that we build. It's a bridge that we build between ourselves, and we have to nurture that space. We have to allow that to happen. We have to consciously try to create that bridge, that connection between us every single time. So let's look into the path, the 5-step process that I mentioned. Let's break it down. So I'm going to go one by one, step by step, and I'm going to explain to you what's the best way to do this. In all conversations, in all relationships, no matter who is involved and no matter what direction you're looking at, there will be two people involved. There obviously can be situations in which you've got one person communicating to multiples, to many others, but I'm going to take it obviously in a simple one-on-one scenario. So in every human communication, there is a sender, a person who expresses something, a giver who projects that information out, and it's a receiver, someone who receives that information, someone who understands what's going on. In this scenario where we're talking about conflict resolution, we're talking about these two partners, these two people experiencing an issue. The issue can be anything, but as a receiver, as the sender, if I'm experiencing an issue, I communicate it out. But as the receiver, we need to be mindful of the fact that we need to learn it's not about us. What happens most of the time, if there is an issue being presented to us, we somehow think it's a problem with us. I am the problem. So we respond defensively. We try to protect ourselves because we feel that the other person experiencing an issue is an attack to us. And that little part of our brain, the almond-shaped amygdala, is reacting as if that person is trying to kill us. Well, not all issues are deadly. Especially in today's world, in a marriage, very few things will kill you. So what have you got to lose? Just listen carefully, accept that your partner is going through something and that it doesn't have to be about you at all. Someone can get angry for a million reasons. It doesn't have to be about you at all. So as the receiver, as the listener, try to be curious about what is this experience for your partner. What are they really going through? Support them and support the relationship by trying to listen very carefully and try to be compassionate and try to really understand the details and the deep structures of what they're actually talking about. So in order to clarify this, you want to explain, to show your partner that you are with them in this, that you are connected with them, that you are paying attention. And make sure that you ask questions to clarify, because it's super important that they understand. So let's say we have an issue with someone being angry over something the other partner has done. And this could be a million different things. I'm going to give you an example in a minute. But for now, I first want to talk about what tends to get in the way, because I told you the amygdala immediately puts us in this defensive mode, in protective mode, so to speak. It gets us to start finding ways to stay alive, essentially. So the most common roadblocks that appear in any kind of conversation are the following. The first one is judgment. So when something is happening and we're not happy with it, we tend to make a judgment of the other person. We tend to blame the other person. So for example, if someone is doing something that doesn't agree with our view of the world, we might say, oh, you're so selfish, you're such a jerk, you're an idiot. How could you possibly do this? This is judgment. All of these things certainly mean that I have expectations that you are not meeting, so I'm judging you as not being good enough and not being able to meet those expectations. Judgment is often interpreted as a personal attack, and when we judge people, they're not going to be very nice and they're not going to listen to us. So be careful with making these judgments. The second way that we block communication is through interpretation, because every human communication means that a lot of the context is left out. If you just pay attention to the words that someone say, you also will make meaning out of the way their face looks, the way they frown or they not frown, the way their body is leaning forward or backwards, if their voice is loud or soft, but also about the story that they tell you. We create our own story. Every connection that we make is actually imaginary, because we fill that gap with our own experience. So we create that reality in our mind, and it will look very different for each of us. The third roadblock is defensiveness, which means when the amygdala is triggered and we want to protect ourselves, we want to make sure that we are safe and the other person is not going to kill us. We put up all sorts of barriers. We sometimes turn it around to the other side to say, well, but you also do the same. Or we say, oh, but it wasn't my fault. My boss didn't allow me to leave on time, or whatever it is. So we get very defensive. We say, oh, but I never do that. How can you say that? Blah, blah, blah. All of these different things happen. The fourth type of roadblock is actually reactive emotion. You might get really upset. You might get really quiet, which means that you completely freeze. You don't want to be part of the problem at all. You just block the other person and ignore them. Or you might throw the plate at the wall, or you might start crying. These are all reactive emotions that obviously are roadblocks to any conflict resolution. So be careful next time you are in a situation where you might be blocking the conversation and the solution, to see which one of these is coming up for you. And it could be that all of them are there, by the way. So it's not just going to be one at a time. And one thing that is really important to remember, because most of these roadblocks are actually triggered by the adrenal response that comes from the amygdala deciding that we are in danger. What we actually want to do is to give ourselves the time for the analyst, for the prefrontal cortex to come online and to analyze the situation and decide that we are not under threat, that actually nobody is trying to kill us. And then we can respond in a very different way, and we can follow the map. Because if we are still in that very adrenalized state, we are not going to be able to do all of the things that I'm going to tell you next. So before you start practicing this tool, make sure that you give, like, when this judgment, interpretation, defensiveness, or reactive emotion is triggered, you are able to stop and give yourselves time to engage the smarter part of your brain. It's usually an easy way to do it, although no. Physically speaking, one way to give time to the prefrontal cortex to respond is actually to take a deep breath, or a few deep breaths, because then our natural analysis abilities come online, and we are able to decide, okay, is this a lion? Is it not a lion? Most of the time not. Obviously we don't see many lions that are threatening our life every day, but it gives us a chance, it gives the prefrontal cortex a chance to analyze the situation and then to make a decision, a conscious decision on how to respond to this stimulus, to this trigger. So now the step 2 in the map is to really understand the issue. So whatever the sender is communicating, you also need to, as the receiver, you need to understand how you process it. What meaning do you make? What is your response? Which buttons is this communication, is this issue pushing for you? Because of course, people that we love tend to push most of our buttons, tend to bring up a lot of stories from our past. So it is important for you as the receiver to spend some time and think, okay, what does this really mean to me? How can I respond to this better so that it gets a different answer? And one way that is really important, one thing that is really important for you to understand is if you are a talker or a thinker. So how do you process information? Talkers are the ones who would be immediately responding. They will talk themselves through the analysis. Their prefrontal cortex will be verbalizing the analysis that is making. Oh, so yeah, you're saying this and you're doing that and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this is the answer. A thinker, on the other hand, will be very quiet, will possibly not respond physically to the argument, to the issue that is being presented. They will analyze it in their head. They will think, okay, give me some time. I need to think about this. I'm not quite sure yet that I understand your problem. And when they get to the end of that analysis, they are able to quickly summarize it and say, oh, and this means X, Y, Z. So it is important that in your relationship with a particular person or in yourself, you know if you tend to be more in the thinker side or in the talker side. Are you the kind of person that gets more out of talking to other people, talking through your ideas and getting something at the end? Or you're the sort of person that prefers to stay in their own world for a while, analyze, and then come up with a solution or the communication that they want to give? So first of all, from a receiver's perspective, in order to really resolve the conflict, we need to make a conscious decision to be supportive of the person who's experiencing the issue. So the support is help me understand the issue, because the biggest problem that we all have in conflict resolution is that actually we do not speak the same language. When one person expresses an issue that they're having, they may not be aware of what need is not being met. So they are not able to put it into words. So the solution is then something that is not matching. So if I have problem A, but I don't express problem A and it comes across looking like problem B, then the solution is not going to be to problem A. It's probably going to be something that maybe partially meets problem B, but has nothing to do with A. And that's not to do with the way I've expressed myself, but it's maybe a lack of understanding of what the real issue is. So a lot of the work that I do with clients in conflict resolution is help them dig deep, several layers deep, 5 layers of why, if you like, to really understand what's going on. So keep asking yourself, I'm angry with my husband for being late. Why? What makes me really angry about that? And then whatever the answer is, ask yourself, why does this happen? And why does this happen? But from a receiver perspective, going back to that, you really want to be sitting back and listening. And when I say listening, I mean listen to understand, not to reply. What we tend to do is to listen to the first, 5-10 words of what the person is saying, then make the assumption that we already know what the issue is, which in 90% of the cases we have no idea, even though we've heard that argument many times before. And then we start thinking of our answer. If it's a conflict that has been going on for years, we already have a rehearsed answer, and every time we just keep practicing it up in our head. And the net result of that is that we missed 90% of what the other partner was saying. So we actually have no idea what the issue is. The second part is, if we've heard it many times before, we think we already know. So we prejudge that. We say, oh, she's going to be pissed off with me because I'm late again, or because I didn't text her, or because I didn't call her. Oh, I know what she's like when these things happen, blah, blah, blah. So this is prejudgment. We already think we know, therefore we don't listen anymore. But how do you know that it's a new problem? How do you know that it's the problem? It's possible that it was the one that you heard before, but maybe you never really understood what it was all about. So the best way to do it is to ask questions, to clarify that what you're hearing is what your partner is meaning, because we very often create our own vision of what a person is saying through interpretation, which is one of the the roadblocks that I mentioned earlier. So moving on to step 3, the sender needs to be able to communicate the issue in a way that it's clear for the receiver. Now, if you know what the unmet need is, it will be easy to communicate the issue. But most of the time we don't know that, and we also have very poor communication skills. So we tend to say it in ways that are not very productive and that trigger the other partner into defensiveness, interpretation, reactive emotions, and all that stuff. So let's take the case where you as the receiver are able to help the sender communicate the issue that they're experiencing. So I mentioned earlier that in order for a solution to be found that is working and that resolves that conflict once and for all, there needs to be deep, deep clarity about the issue so that you know exactly what's going on. One way, there's 2 tools that I use to help clients clarify the issue. One of them is a paradigm called facts, judgments, feelings. So I'll explain what it means. In any human experience that we have, there's going to be a bunch of facts that are verifiable and physical and easy for everyone to see. Let's say the issue that these two people are having is that the husband is late for dinner. Well, this is a fact, because if he's supposed to be home at 6, there is an expectation or an agreement, a conscious or an unconscious agreement, or an unspoken agreement, that one of the partners will be somewhere at a certain time, and he shows up at 7:30. Well, that's a fact. Everybody knows that if you're not there at 6, you're late, right? It's kind of how he is. We make assumptions and we generalize about things. But this is a fact, right? The fact in itself is neither here nor there. It's 6, well, he's home. It's 6 o'clock, it's 7:30, he's still home, he's present physically in the room. But then comes the judgment, right? When we say, oh, but you're late. Late is a judgment. Late versus what? Right? Late implies a comparison that you should have been here, a comparison and an expectation that has not been met. So I'm making a judgment that, oh, because you're late, I also think that you're inconsiderate, that you're unreliable, that you're a jerk, that you're selfish, that you don't love me, that you don't care about me. So all of these are actual judgments. They're not facts, right? Selfish is a judgment. Late is a judgment, all of these things. And all of these judgments cause certain feelings for me in my body. So if I think someone's late, that pisses me off. If I think someone is unreliable, it makes me angry. If I think someone doesn't love me, it makes me sad and disappointed. So the feelings that are triggered by my judgment, they are triggered by the judgment, not by the facts. So in any argument that you're facing, try to focus on the facts, and that's how we're going to get to the issue. Then if you have the issue, let's say the issue is I'm feeling angry because my boyfriend came home late. It's good to ask yourself why. What makes me angry about this situation? Well, actually, I'm angry because he should have been here at 6, and I expected him to be here at 6 because I needed him to help me with the kids. Well, okay, why? Why do I have this expectation that he has to help me with the kids? Like, well, I didn't sign up for raising my kids all by myself, right? So like, well, why is this a problem? Well, it's a problem because when we started our relationship, we agreed that we're going to share our domestic chores in certain ways and so on. So I think you get the picture. We don't need to go too deep into this. But the more you ask yourself why, and you go to several layers, usually 5 levels of why, you tend to get more to the reality of what is really happening there. So let's say that we have this issue where someone was late and they didn't call the wife, and the wife was worried. So the next step is really to give validation to each other, to clarify with each other what is really going on. So the receiver will give validation to the sender to say, oh, I understand that you had a problem. I understand that you had a problem with me being late, but what about me being late is the problem? What is bothering you about this? Because there could be many, many different reasons why me being late is a problem. Well, the wife might say, well, because I was worried about you, of course. And then as the receiver, he say, okay, so let me get this straight. I was late, I didn't call you, you were worried about me. Is that the issue? Then the wife might say, actually, to be honest, the reason I was annoyed with you, or I was worried about you, was because I actually cooked a nice expensive dinner for you as a surprise for our anniversary, and now it's ruined, and actually that makes me angry, and that makes me feel that you don't care about our relationship and all that stuff. So there's all these different steps that you can take in that communication with a partner and understand what the real issue is. So as a sender, as a little review, and also as a receiver, the most important thing that you need to consider is to get clarity about the issue. Both from the sender perspective, you really need to know what exactly is making you upset, or is making you angry, or is making you sad about the situation. And then find the vocabulary, the words to express that, so that your partner really understands what that means for them. Be sure that they get it, and keep supporting each other in explaining what the issue is by giving each other validation, by listening, by mirroring and clarifying what exactly is happening for the other side. And then on step 4, the communication map guides you back to the sender, where the sender has to be the one making a specific request on how their need would be met, because they are the only ones who know how that need will be met. But obviously, I've said it before, in order for you to get an idea of how a certain need can be met, you need to be really clear about the need. So do the exercises that I mentioned before. Focus on the facts. Ask yourselves why, and figure out what would be the way that that need needs to be met, the way you would like that need to be met. And you then have to make a request, ask for what you want, but not in a demanding, commanding kind of way, but in a nice statement to say what would really work for me would be if you could maybe text me if you're going to be late for dinner. So this is a nice way of making a request by using this kind of referential language, making a suggestion as opposed to giving your partner a command, because nobody really likes to be told what to do. From a receiver's perspective, it is really important that you support the sender in making a request and not get defensive at this point, or not think, oh, we've been there, I tried that before and it didn't work, and you still weren't happy. So try to avoid defensiveness at this point, because it's kind of nicer if you can really listen to the partner. These are a few alternatives to request. This is what we do, and they're not particularly great ways of responding. Sometimes we complain, we say, oh, but you never do any of this, or you always do something like this. We are becoming entitled to say, well, I deserve your attention. I'm your wife. You're supposed to be doing this for me. Or we can be very demanding to say, you must do this for me because this is the only way it's going to work. Or this could also be a threat, or it could be coercion. Say, if you do this again, I'm going to leave you. If you don't do as I say, something bad is going to happen. Or we continue to criticize our partner to say, oh, you're such a jerk. You always do this. I'm so fed up with the way you're behaving towards me. Or we do what is called mind reading, which means, oh, I know what you're thinking right now. You think that I'm an idiot and that it's my fault. And, it's all what I'm being so demanding and so horrible to you, and you do everything for me. So this is mind reading. And then as a receiver, you want, like I said, to support the sender to make a request. You can actually ask the question, how can I support you to meet this need? What could I do better next time? What would work for you? What would be a good answer to this problem, or a good solution to this problem? All of these are great questions you can ask to support your partner to communicate this. So when you think of it from the sender's perspective, having your need met is really to let go of the how that need has to be met, which means it's not important how it is done, as long as it is done. So if you want to have a clean living room because you have people coming in and out of your house all the time, then it doesn't matter whether your husband cleans up himself, or he hires a helper to come in and do the job, or he gets the kids to help around the house. However it's done, what matters is that the need is met. So focus on that and don't get stuck on it must be this way. The moment we put ultimatums in front of our partners or anybody in our life, the moment we say, well, it can only be done this way, otherwise I will not accept it, then we're actually getting in the way of finding resolution to that conflict. So let go of this attachment to how, and focus on what you need, and be open to it being resolved in many, many different ways that you have not yet considered, because this is why you've been going around in circles. So how to respond to a request? As a receiver, very often we start analyzing that situation versus what we are willing to do versus what we think the right answer is, and then say, yes, but I don't want it that way, or it has to be done this way, or that wouldn't work because we've tried it before. So the best way to answer a request is to give what is called an unqualified yes, which means, yes, absolutely, darling, I'm totally prepared to work on this with you. If the solution that is being proposed by the partner isn't 100% acceptable to you, or isn't something that you think you can ever provide, it's okay to propose a better solution. You can have an alternative. So for example, if the partner, the husband says, okay, what would I need to do differently next time so that you don't get so upset if I'm home late, then the wife might say, oh, you should always call me by 5 o'clock to let me know if you're not going to be home at 6. Okay, so the husband would say, all right, well, okay, that makes a lot of sense. It is possible, though, that I will not be able to call you all the time because I may be in meetings or something like this, but I will send you a text. How does that sound? And then this is the step 5, which is when you negotiate, where you find a win-win solution, where everybody is getting what they want, and where you actually need to push yourselves to find new options, third options, fourth options. Give yourself time, because what normally happens, we get stuck in certain ways, in the ways that we thought it needs to happen. So be patient and give yourself a chance. And the last 2 words is like, try to never say no in these situations. Always say yes. How about we try something like this? Propose a counter solution and stay committed. There's a difference between promise and commitment. A good agreement is one that you can keep and you can repeat and you can keep doing it every single time. And that's the end of it. I've had a couple of comments before. A lot of people said that it would work. One of the questions was, where am I going to post this? I will put this in my private Facebook group and you can share it with people. And I will also, on request, send a PDF version of the communication map. If you need any help getting to the bottom of the issue, obviously, you can always PM me and I can help you resolve any conflict. And if you have any other questions about how to get yourself more intimate with your partner, I will be here, and I'll be doing another training next Friday and a Facebook Live on Tuesday, which I will communicate on Facebook again. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, and try these techniques, see if they work for you. I hope they work. I know they work because they work with so many other people. Have a beautiful weekend, and I will see you on Facebook very, very soon. Take care, everyone. Have fun.